Before the video starts, this is my first time editing, writing, and in general making a YouTube video. So I hope you guys enjoy my interpretation and analysis of A Silent Voice. A Silent Voice is a movie on Netflix. I highly recommend you watch the movie before watching this video because there will be spoilers ahead. In my opinion, A Silent Voice was the best movie of 2016. That being said, you might be wondering why am I doing an analysis in 2020. I rewatched the movie last week and again yesterday for research purposes, and I noticed how amazing the movie was in its small details and in the overall plot. The premise of the movie is a boy meets girl. That in itself is not unique because off the top of my head, I can name several shows or animes like Orange Baskets, Inuyasha, Your Name, which is another great movie that was released in 2017. The thing that separates A Silent Voice from other animes is grounded in reality. While other animes are based on some sort of supernatural factor or unrealistic turn of events, A Silent Voice does not have a magical dragon granting 3 wishes, but rather it's grounded in reality and addresses many real topics like anxiety, disabilities, and suicide. Section 1. Introducing the characters. The main character is Ishida, or Shoyo, who suffers from low self-esteem, bad anxiety, and in my opinion is suffering from the 5 stages of grief, which I will talk about later in the video. The female lead is Shoko. She is deaf and suffers from insecurities due to her deafness, which leads her to feeling like a burden on the other characters. She is also a catalyst for change, acceptance, and character development towards Shoyo. Next are some of the side characters. I'm going to explain their roles in the movie when they actually appear, but for right now, I'm just going to explain what they do and how they impacted the plot. The first character is Miki, and she's manipulative and pretty much a terrible person with some redeeming qualities. The second person is Nagisa, who is a total bro and was Shoyo's first friend in high school. The third person is Miko, who is a really static character. In my opinion, her impact was pretty minimal. Shitoshi, who is a very flat character, but he's definitely cool. There are some other characters, but they're not on a need to explain basis till they actually appear, but they are pretty impactful to the plot. For instance, the mothers, Oshoko's sister, or Inoue. They will be mentioned occasionally throughout this video. Shoyo, our main character, has something called anxiety, which means he lost the ability to talk to his peers, friends. Whenever he sees someone, an X pops up, and that X exists because he does not see them as friends or as people, so he gets anxiety. If he looks at someone, he feels like he's about to puke, so he always looks at the ground. That's the only way he can actually engage in society. Whenever he looks at people, he feels as if they're talking about him or saying some negative stuff. It's to the point where he almost has mental breakdowns. He has to cover his ears, he has to stare down, he has to block out the noise, because if he doesn't, his anxiety acts up. But it's shown throughout the story that there are moments where the X's do fall off, and that's when he's having fun or the barrier between stranger and friend disappear. This is shown through Nagisa when at first his bike was getting stolen, and then Shoya helped by giving away his bike to the thief. And he had this moment of realization when he was like, damn, that's my friend, because he went to a rice field and actually got the bike back. For the remainder of the video, I'll be calling Shoya as Ishida because it's easier for me to pronounce, and pronunciation is a big issue for me. So where Ishida's anxiety stems from is his childhood. In elementary school, Shoko entered his class and it became apparent that she was deaf, and this led to a lot of bullying from Ishida and his peers. They bullied her in many ways, from physical abuse, damaging her earbuds, and a whole slew of issues. It got so extreme that she eventually had to transfer schools, and the person who got scapegoated for all the bullying, all of it, was Ishida. And this led to his anxiety and trust issues because not only was he blamed for all the issues, he was also ostracized by his peers. And this caused a little rift from him. It caused him to have low self-esteem and eventually Upon seeing how much damage he'd done to Shoko, and like his mom paying back Shoko's mom for the hearing aids, he actually suffered a lot. It caused him to change, and it gave him perspective. It actually showed him what it means to be a social outcast. It got to such a point that he was about to commit suicide. And this becomes important later. Small details, for instance, as seen in the suicide become very important because it's a foil to what happens later at the climax. But he doesn't commit suicide. His mom is able to convince him not to do it. And at that point, he's still suffering, but he met up with Shoko again. And through that, he tried to make amends, and he did make amends, which enabled him to actually have fun for once in his life. His life started changing for the better ever since he tried to make amends with Shoko. He made friends, he started having fun. It became apparent during the roller coaster scene where for the first time in his life he actually had fun. It got to the point he was like, he believed he doesn't even deserve this opportunity or chance. Let us move on to our next character, who is Shoko. Shoko has been bullied throughout elementary school, but it's calmed down ever since she went to high school, where she's grown up. She never treated her disability as a disability. She always kept a smile. She's happy. She's very apologetic, which is a turn-off for many people. For instance, Uno. I like to call her Uno. I don't really know how to pronounce her name. It's the bully female that always tries to bring everyone back into elementary school. We'll talk about her later at a different point because she is a unique character to talk about too and dissect. But it becomes more evident that her disability is becoming a burden to her, and she's becoming more affected, not because of herself, but because of the people around her. She feels that she's a burden to the people around her. For instance, Ishida and her mother and her sister. And this was triggered by many accidents. For instance, her grandmom died, so that could have affected her mental state too. Unlike Ishida, who contemplated suicide, he didn't. But Shoko was different. She actually jumped. If Ishida wasn't there, she would have died. Like, she would have really died. But a really major turning point was the roller coaster scene where she had a conversation with Uno. And you can kind of see the mentality of both characters. Uno believes that Shoko wasn't strong enough because she keeps on hiding behind her disability and she never makes an attempt to actually talk to anyone or her own desires. It's kind of like a foil. One character can't convey how she feels because of her disability, and this leads to confusion, while the other character is mad because she isn't revealing her feelings. So there's a conflict, and this is what eventually leads Shoko to understanding that she's a burden. This actually affected her and led her to contemplating suicide. She's just a nice soul, and she's always been that. She wants to be friends with everyone. She just doesn't know how to convey it, and that's what is her weakness, her fatal flaw. Ishida's is his anxiety, and hers is her inability to convey feelings. And they both share that trait. Just because you're deaf doesn't mean you're mute. You still have the ability to talk, which means you're able to convey your feelings. But since she hasn't had much social interaction, she doesn't know how to convey her feelings. There are many scenes, for instance, when she tried to confess that she wasn't able to and tried to play it off. She doesn't know how to properly express her feelings. That's why, if you actually dissect her main phrase, which is "I'm sorry," you can see that it displays her mentality. She says sorry a lot because she actually believes that After analyzing both Shoko and Ishida, it's time to understand why the story is so compelling. When you take a look at the hypocrite scene, it's literally a scene where Ishida comes to the realization that he's no better than Uno because they're both living in the past. Ishida is still stuck with the consequences of his past life decision, which is why he's trying to make up amends with Shoko, while Uno is trying to rekindle their friendship from elementary school. She wants to make everything like it was before, even though it possibly can't be the same, while Ishida's trying to make a better future for himself. So one person is trying to do better, while the other person is still stuck in the past. But there's another part that's very key and integral to the story. They're both the same in the way they're doing it. Ishida hooked up Shoko to one of her old friends, while Uno's doing the same. The characters in the story aren't perfect, and it's displayed by this, because there's a bunch of scenes where they're hypocrites, and they do stuff that's grimy or wrong or bad or sad. But that's the thing about her story. No one's perfect. Everyone has flaws. Even the most perfect characters you think have flaws. There are multiple scenes where people try to commit suicide. People do wrong things. Shido was an asshole. He was most definitely a terrible person, but he's trying to improve himself. That's what makes the story compelling. Even though people are bad, they can change. And even if they're doing good, there's moments when they fall off. There's a whole scene where Shido's world is crumbling down because his past is coming back to haunt him. His guilt is coming again. It's reappearing. His anxiety acts up. He runs to the bridge.
Maybe you guys could be friends.
And we'll go back to the bridge because the bridge actually symbolizes something. There's a lot of symbolism in the bridge, the fireworks. There's a reason they're all reoccurring.
Don't do me any favors.
Well, he goes to the bridge and he has a breakdown. He has a breakdown and it's fine to have a breakdown. It's fine to have mental issues.
The exact same thing.
And he snaps on everyone. He calls them out for what they are, what their flaws are. Each by piece by piece by piece. But guess what he did? Who he didn't call out the flaws in? That's Shoko. Because he's not honest to himself about how he feels about Shoko or the reasons why he's doing it. He's sure he wants to make amends. He's stuck in tunnel vision. He keeps on seeing his past and only one route, and that's Shoko. But he has a whole group of friends around him, even if he doesn't realize. And that is his fatal flaw. His anxiety is preventing him from seeing what's truly around him. He's blindsided, and that's what makes the movie so compelling, because this happens to everyone. Everyone's blindsided by problems. It can be from poverty, it can be from loss, it can be from anything, disability. That's why the scene is so impactful, because this is the first time he's actually speaking from the bottom of his heart and saying how he actually feels. This is actually how he feels about each and every single one of these people. But it's a little hurtful and it's a little blunt, but this is what actually happening. He doesn't express his feelings. This problem shows what happens when you don't properly express your feelings. It gets pent up and bam, it's gonna burst. Shoko has this problem. It's like foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing what's happening. This movie does a lot of foreshadowing. So Ishida actually got his release. He was able to express how he felt, and he actually invited Shoko to a date. But guess what happened to Shoko? She never was able to express how she felt about herself, her own self-hatred and doubt, and it actually pushed her to commit suicide. And that's why that scene was so impactful. Her actions have consequences, just like Ishida's did. Ishida's bullying led Shoko to transfer and him getting shunned and outcast. And now Shoko's action led to Ishida going to the hospital and almost killing him. Actions have consequences. Section 2. Symbolism. The thing about symbolism is, it's pointless if there is no meaning behind the symbolism. A show, movie, anime can cram themselves filled with symbolism, but without purpose, it doesn't do anything. Evangelion is a perfect example of a show that has a bunch of symbolism, but never really is able to do anything with it. But the difference is a silent voice handles symbolism in the most perfect way, and that is through simplicity. It doesn't make the symbolism complex or in front of your face, but rather they make it subtle in something that you can search up or look back into, and you'll realize it's there. It's not really head first. So there's two key points of symbolism. The first one is fireworks. Fireworks are supposed to represent happiness, celebration. They're closely related to those two things. However, the thing about fireworks is it also symbolizes temporary happiness, because after the burst of light, there's darkness. So you can have your moments of happiness there, and then the darkness will come back. So in my case, I saw as foreshadowing, because early on in this movie, you could see Ishida about to commit suicide, but then you see fireworks and bam, he doesn't kill himself. And this is kind of foreshadowing, because the fireworks happen and it's good. There's temporary happiness. He finds Shoko, he finds that little happiness. But guess what happens? Later on in the movie, she commits suicide, and what's popping off during her committing suicide? It's fireworks. It's a fireworks festival. So it's the way they used it was so perfect, because they kind of used it as a foil and irony. So during the moments where there is sadness, they use the fireworks, even though it's supposed to represent happiness. The second piece of symbolism they used was bridges. And bridges are supposed to represent union, community, and communication. But it can also represent crossing over, or crossing over in two shapes and ways and forms. The first one is through life and death, and the second one is through hardship. But if you notice in the movie, a lot of key scenes happen during the bridges or near bridges. For instance, when Ishida snaps for the first time is at a bridge. It's the first time he's truly conveying how he feels about everyone and their weaknesses and their bad traits, their negativity. He's finally communicating his negativity. The second instance is when Shoko reveals her feelings. It's near a bridge. She confesses her love. It's communication. But when we look back into the death and life aspect to it, we can see that Ishida almost committed suicide on a bridge. That's hardship. He was crossing over. It's life and death in that moment. Bridges are a gateway. It can be through communication and through life. And the way they just play it out is perfect. If you would never notice the first time, but when you look back into the movie, you'll notice that there are key moments when symbolism is apparent. They don't rub it in your face. They don't throw. Section 3, my personal interpretation of what happened and what I got out of the movie. In my personal opinion, what happened was Ishida was going through the 5 stages of grief. You might be questioning who died or who passed away, but in my opinion, it was Ishida's sense of self, his self-purpose that died that day. We can see this in denial. So denial is the first stage of grief. It helps us survive the loss. So our world becomes meaningless and overwhelming. Life makes no sense. We go numb. We wonder how we can go on. And this is very apparent in the beginning of the scene. He was about to commit suicide, and he just kept on pushing and pushing just for his mom. He made money, gave his mom money, and then he was about to commit suicide. He's also displayed anger. He went through anger. For instance, the bridge scene, that was just pure anger. Anger doesn't have any limits. You can say to anyone, you can be angry towards anyone, your friends, your family, religion. So he was angry towards his friends. He aired them out. He talked about every single one of their insecurities and just aired it out. And the thing about anger is its strength. At first, denial is what gives you the grace to handle loss, and anger is what gives you the strength to handle it. The third stage is bargaining. Bargaining was displayed when he actually saved Shoko. He fell in the pool, and actually not fell in the pool, he was actually lifting her up, and he bargained with God to give him 1 more ounce of strength. And he said if he did, he would do things differently. And he promised that he would look people in the eyes, he wouldn't be scared anymore, he would fight his anxiety. And that was his bargaining step. Because after a loss, it's a temporary truce. It can take many shapes, ways, or forms, like thinking in the past, or thinking what you would do. It's what ifs. You keep on making what if statements. So the next step he displayed was depression, which he experienced all the time. He literally came back and he was facing anxiety and depression, and the emotion, the pure emotion made him sick. He was depressed that he wasn't able to keep his bargain, because he promised that he will come back and look people in the face, and the first thing he did was break that bargain. And the last step or stage of grief is acceptance. He accepted his loss, his self-esteem, his self-identity. And guess what he did? He accepted it and he moved on, and he was able to overcome his anxiety. He accepted at what he was, and now he's... Since I kind of messed up my editing, I have some free space, and so I'm going to talk about some of the things or small details I really enjoyed in the movie and just was really good. If you notice in certain scenes, for instance, you can see that the X Factor really pops up and goes instantaneously. It's a change of mindset. So it's directly tied to his mindset. For instance, during the hypocrite scene where Uno brings Ishida to the stall, you can see they had no X's, right? But then as soon as he realized it was him, he turned around, walked away, realized what happened. X's just magically popped up in their face. So it's technically a state of mind. Another real small detail that I really liked was that Shoko was surrounded by a bunch of dead stuff because her sister didn't want her to commit suicide. But they're all animals, bugs, and stuff. But the one thing that actually made her regret or just totally hate suicide was seeing the actual effects it had on a real life person. So that's just some cool details I had to or wanted to say because I messed up the editing. So I had like a minute or 2 minutes to talk, and that's pretty much it. I'm kind of upset because like I I originally was gonna one take everything, but I couldn't because my voice, and it just sounded inconsistent, terrible. I have this habit of like messing up. So I was like, I'm gonna cut it up into pieces. And I realized one of the pieces was loose. So thank you. My outro thank you is about to pop up too, but might as well thank you for my mistake. This is the end of the video. Thank you for watching. It's much appreciated that you stuck this long. But this is my first time editing. I'm kind of proud of myself. The video quality wasn't that great. Finding clips was hard. Editing took 2 days to learn, but I'm kind of happy I did this. It was kind of satisfying to do this myself. Even though like this wasn't my best work, I know I could have done better. But for a first time, I think it's pretty good. If anyone has any tips or advice they could give me, I would love that. Especially around my audio. I feel like my audio was terrible, but if you disagree, just comment. And honestly, this was a good experience. I love doing this. And hopefully, if you guys have any recommendations for movies or animes I should do, I would love this. I would love to do that. And thank you for watching. This was made in loving memory of Charles's house, R.I.P.